If you had put just $1,000 into Bitcoin 10 years ago, that money would be worth over $500,000 today. Read that again. $500,000 from a decision most people didn't even take 15 seconds to think about. But here's the part nobody tells you. Most of the people who actually bought Bitcoin back then don't have that money anymore. They sold it. Some sold out of fear. Some sold to lock in profits. Some sold because a friend said, "It's over. This thing is done." The real shock of this story isn't the price. It's how many people held the winning ticket and threw it away with their own hands. This isn't really a story about Bitcoin. It's a story about every person who let go of the biggest opportunity of their life, simply because they didn't have the patience to sit still. Every generation has its own version of this regret. Somebody's grandparents passed on a piece of land because it looked worthless at the time. Somebody's parents skipped investing in a company because the idea sounded ridiculous, or turned down stock options because a steady paycheck felt safer. Now an entire generation has its own version of that same regret, and its name is Bitcoin. In another 10 years, it'll have a different name entirely, and the people telling this story will be talking about whatever that next thing turns out to be. So, let's go back. 10 years. You wake up, get ready for work. Nothing dramatic happening. Your salary is average. You pay your bills, spend a little on the weekend, and whatever's left just sits in your savings account, doing nothing. You're not thinking about crypto or blockchain. Those words barely exist in your world yet. You're thinking about rent, about whether you can afford to eat out this month. Nothing about your day suggests that history is about to hand you a decision that splits your future into two completely different timelines. Then a friend sends you a message. There's this digital currency called Bitcoin. It's becoming a big deal. You look at the screen, confused. Digital currency? You can't hold it. It's not backed by a bank. You laugh. Sounds fake. This can never become real money. And that's it. That's the moment. A small, forgettable reaction that quietly decides your entire financial future. Nobody realizes in the moment they're making one of the biggest decisions of their life, because big decisions rarely feel big while you're making them. They feel small, easy to shrug off, easy to forget by dinner. Now imagine you didn't laugh. You did a little digging, read an article, watched a video, thought, "All right, let's try this." You put in $1,000, small enough that even if it vanished completely, you'd still sleep fine. Here's where most people's brain builds one lazy formula out of this story. Just hold on, and you'll become rich. Put the money in, close your eyes, open them 10 years later. Done. That's not what actually happened. Nobody talks about the 10 years in between. How many nights the price crashed while you were mid-scroll on your phone? How many times you watched your investment cut in half in real time? The version people love telling is the highlight reel. Buy low, wait, cash out rich. Nobody tells the version where you're lying awake at 2 a.m., refreshing a chart, wondering if you just made the worst financial decision of your life. That version doesn't trend. But that version is the real one. Investing is easy. Living through an investment is hard. Bitcoin didn't crash once. It fell 50%, sometimes 60%, at one point close to 80%. Picture that, your $1,000 turning into $200 while every news channel says the same thing. Bitcoin is dead. It was a bubble, and it finally burst. Social media fills up with memes about crypto investors losing everything. Even the experts split down the middle, half calling it the currency of the future, half calling it a scam. And at home, family telling you, just take out whatever's left before the loss gets worse. Not because they wanted to see you fail, but because watching someone you love lose money feels unbearable, even when the loss is only on paper and hasn't actually happened yet. This is where the story stops being about money and turns into a psychology test. Will you hold your position when every single voice around you says you're wrong? Think about two people who bought on the exact same day at the exact same price. Person A checks the price every morning. feels sick every time it's read, and finally sells during the worst crash, walking away with maybe $300 from that original $1,000. Person B mutes the notifications, stops checking for months at a time, and almost forgets the account exists. 10 years later, Person A is telling people at dinner parties that crypto was a scam. Person B is sitting on 6 figures and barely mentions it. Same asset, same starting point, same crashes along the way. Completely different outcome, because the money was never the variable. The nervous system was. This is exactly where most people fail. They sell out of panic. Then months or years later, the price climbs back, and they're stuck on the sidelines thinking, I wish I had just waited. Play that out in real terms. Someone buys in, watches the value triple, feels like a genius, then watches it crash right back down and keep falling. At some point, the fear becomes unbearable. They tell themselves they're being responsible, cutting their losses, protecting what's left. So they sell. And that single decision, made in a moment of pure exhaustion, ends up being the most expensive click of their financial life. Because the recovery always looks obvious in hindsight and impossible to predict in the moment. Here's the actual lesson buried in all of this. Successful investing was never just about picking the right asset. Whether Bitcoin was the right call is only half the story. The hard part, the part nobody prepares you for, is tolerating volatility, watching paper losses stack up through every crash, and still keeping your composure. Controlling your emotions when everything around you is screaming at you to run, and resisting the single most natural, most damaging human reaction there is. Panic selling. That's exactly why 2 people can buy the same asset on the same day, at the same price, and end up with 2 completely different outcomes. One sells during the crash, the other holds. The difference was never in the asset. The difference was in the mindset, and this isn't unique to Bitcoin. Stocks, real estate, private business. The exact same principle applies everywhere. People who stay patient usually end up on the winning side. People who react emotionally usually end up hurting themselves. Warren Buffett has spent decades saying some version of the same line. The market is built to transfer money from the impatient to the patient. It's not a secret formula. It's just a fact that's almost impossible to live by, because patience is boring and fear is loud. Wealthy investors think differently. They're not buying the price. They're buying time. They don't ask, what's this worth today? They ask, what does this look like in 5, 10, 15 years? Every time the market dips, they go back to their original reasoning and ask, is the reason I invested still true? Or did the price drop just mess with my head? The average retail investor does the opposite. They watch the chart. Red makes them panic. Green makes them greedy. A long-term investor looks somewhere else entirely, at adoption, at how many people are actually using the technology, at which direction the world is moving. One person sees a number. The other sees the future. That single shift in thinking is what actually separates wealthy investors from everyone else over a 10-year stretch. It was never really about who had more money to start with, or who got the lucky tip at the right time. It was about who could sit still while everyone else was moving, and stay calm while everyone else was panicking. This is also why almost none of these people got rich overnight. That's the myth version of the story, the one that makes for a good headline but a terrible strategy. The real version looks boring for years at a time. Long stretches where nothing exciting happens, where the price barely moves, where it would be easy to get distracted and put the money into something louder and shinier. The people who actually ended up wealthy from decisions like this weren't the smartest people in the room. They were usually the ones who were the least emotionally reactive. They treated the boring years as part of the plan instead of a warning sign to get out. So here's the real question, and it has nothing to do with Bitcoin anymore, because that decade already happened. The real question is this: if the next life-changing opportunity is standing in front of you right now, at this exact moment, will you actually recognize it? Or will you laugh it off, the same way people did with Bitcoin 10 years ago? Because opportunity never announces itself. It never looks guaranteed. It always looks a little risky, a little confusing, a little too early to take seriously. The only difference between the people who win and the people who spend their life saying, "I wish I had," is whether they took the step despite the confusion. Maybe it's a technology nobody respects yet. Maybe it's a skill everyone calls a waste of time. Maybe it's an idea that sounds too small, too weird, too early. 10 years from now, someone will be telling this exact same story about whatever that thing turns out to be. And you'll either be the person who saw it coming, or the person still convincing themselves it was never a real opportunity in the first place. If this story hit you even a little, drop a comment with one word: hold or sell. Tell me what you would have actually done at the bottom of that crash. And if you want to see the next asset that quiet, patient money is buying, right now, while everyone else is looking away, follow along, because that video is coming next.